Ability of space for inclusive systems needs to be challenged. It struck me very much when you see the name of the organisation and the history of the smile of the child, how important it is not only to be preventing children from crying their tears, but also to promote spaces where children can smile and thrive and flourish. So that has to be a central complement to the work we're looking at today. So I will hone in on some spatial aspects as part of what we're calling now a spatial turn that we're hoping to see develop in education in the next decade. The other key theme of my presentation is that of differentiation, so that there is no one school bullying problem or aggression problem. There are many different dimensions. So in other words, it is a behaviour, and underlying every behaviour are a range of emotions. So for example, if you were to walk into the city centre today, all of you will be doing the same behaviour, but the motivations behind why you'll be going to the city centre could change very much. So we need to see the differentiation there within our solutions and as well as within our spaces and spaces of belonging. So space matters. So here we need to break up the idea that comes from Descartes that space is empty and meaningless and a non-entity. So this idea then creates the idea that the school is just one empty, homogeneous space, whereas of course it's not, particularly from the experience of children. So we need to see how we break up our school into micro spaces, different spaces beyond just the classroom, where children can feel they belong, they can thrive. These spaces may be nurture rooms, they may be spaces of silence, they could be school gardens. We obviously have, sports facilities and spaces, therapeutic spaces. So we're creating a multi-spatial dimension for inclusion here. So our recent work with our centre has looked also at agency, children's agency in these spaces, and our Routledge International Handbook on Equity and Inclusion in Education also highlights that our very concepts, such as inclusion, marginalisation, exclusion, these are all fundamentally spatial in their understandings. And they're not simply mere metaphors. I was very struck by the words of the students earlier today when they talked about bridges and walls and how we need to have, and these are very much, again, spatial terms. So space is not just a physical issue, it's a relational space issue, and these are not simply metaphors, because a walled-based space in relational space terms is a space of hierarchy, a space where students are powerless, where students are not being able to articulate their needs and also their connections with others. So we really need to drill down into these two key concepts of bridging spaces, to see space as a system of relationships in system terms. So we talk about inclusive systems, that this is a relational space concept. So we need to challenge the neutralization of this concept in our thinking for the future. So key priorities for systemic approaches, and as I say, spatial systemic approaches here, and differentiation. And we're looking at reconfiguring issues in schools, families, and communities. So of course here again, even just touching on the spatial strategy again, what are our systems like for spaces for play for our 9 to 12-year-olds in your local areas or municipalities or cities? What are the spaces for play for our teenagers? Okay, we maybe have good playgrounds in many countries for 0 to 6-year-olds, but where are the spaces for human flourishing, both in the communities and in the schools? Do we have a spatial strategy for these spaces for children to enjoy themselves? So part of the argument here is that bullying is a failure of human happiness. And if you have happy children who are thriving, they don't necessarily need to be aggressive. Now that's with the caveat of trauma, which I will come on to in a few minutes. So how do we develop those aspects? So part of my work has been also to do a report for the European Commission in 2016, where we reviewed international research on school bullying, aggression, and also practice across across member states, including seeing the gaps in their strategies. So some of the ideas here then, fed into European policy on that. And some reflections are also to show where there are gaps, at least in some countries and in research. So I'm delighted today to see the emphasis on family support services in the Scandinavian models, in the Swedish and Norwegian models. This is such a vital aspect of family support. Much of the international research on school bullying neglects family support. So that's not just the same as engagement in school of parents. It's not just simply school engagement. It's also the key idea that parents' communication and parenting strategies need to be worked at, so that you have emotionally healthy communicative practices by parents from a very early age with their children. So how we build in parenting programs, communication spaces at a family level, this is a key dimension. Because make no mistake, when you look at the research evidence internationally, Larrea et al., looking at 70 studies, they found that both victims and bully victims are more likely to be exposed to negative parenting behaviour, including abuse, neglect and maladaptive parenting. So frankly, school bullying strategies and wider national strategies that do not address the issue of parental supports to change the climate of a culture of violence that may be in the home, relational violence, that these are learned at home in many ways for at least some groups within bullying, and so we really need to address that. Also, Sarander's well-known studies sees how bully victims in particular, they're the highest risk group, would tend to come from family issues, again, pre-existing conduct, behaviour and emotional problems. So the family support aspect is something outside the scope of schools to engage, so we need that bridge. And I see again in the presentations in the last session the wonderful bridges now between health, education and social services. When we asked countries around Europe of this type of collaboration in 2014, there was a European Commission Eurodice report. I asked them to put this question in: what is the tradition of collaboration between health, education and social services? Very many ministries pointed out that there was not a strong tradition of collaboration. We see that change now in the examples given earlier in Sweden, Norway and in Slovenia also. So, and again, okay, this point I won't go into it in as much detail, but there are studies that are often somewhat neglected in some of the bullying research literature that focuses very much just on the school and school bullying, that there is evidence there from Cross et al.'s work in Australia in particular, showing how active parental involvement in engaging with with their children, with the schools, has a big impact, has an additional impact beyond what the school can do. So we do need to engage our parents as agents in this process. So going back to this point then of differentiation, in recent years I think the European Commission has also recognised that this public health model of need requires implementation for a strategic system review for school bullying and violence. So in other words, you have to be clear on what level of a system you are trying to bring your intervention into play with. So are you taking a universal approach, all the school, a whole school approach? Yes, that's great, but one element. Are you having a promotion of strengths aspect? I've emphasised the spaces feature that may come within that. The selective prevention are then for group-based approaches, generally not ones that put all the highest needs children all together, but you have other kinds of group-based activities for more moderate risk, but you do need the indicated prevention of individual intensive supports for those with chronic needs, with entrenched psychological trauma and difficulties. And as the Slovenian colleagues just were talking about, that individual one-to-one counselling aspect is really vital there. So I make no apologies for emphasising what is now regarded in developmental psychology as a truism, that there are certain childhood experiences that are detrimental to people's well-being. Their experience of trauma and adverse childhood experiences, I've listed them here. Our own report for the Commission argues that bullying needs to be added in here. And the argument, going back to developmental psychologist Rutter on this, is that it's not simply having one of these, but when you have a cumulative amount of these, then you are into huge difficulties. These are entrenched problems, and no teacher can be a therapist. Okay, teacher can have a mental health promotion role, a stress prevention role, but you do need to recognise at what level the system is operating, and that means knocking the heads together of the different ministries. For the other spatial concept that was actually implicit in the Norwegian presentation of a one-stop shop, co-location of services in one place, not fragmented services scattered everywhere, in one place where students feel at ease, families feel at ease, you put it in one place, and you have that as a commonality there. So you see the list of these, domestic violence, substance abuse and family, emotional or physical neglect. The British Journal of Psychiatry 2012 stated that emotional neglect was the most pernicious impact on later outcomes. Mental illness and family, loss of parent through divorce, death or abandonment, physical abuse, emotional abuse, a family member in prison, consistent poverty, experience of suicide, childhood homelessness, placed in state care, and then bullying in school. So all of these interplay in. So if you're looking at the entrenched bullying perpetrator, one of the first questions you have to ask is, why is that child on fire? Why are they externalizing their pain? What's gone on in their lives, probably linked to some of these traumas that may have happened? So you're looking at an intergenerational chain of pain that we need to stop through our complex needs support services. Then when you're going on to the issue of relational space again, that it is important to look at school climate. School climate is vital, and we've seen the emphasis on whole school system approaches earlier, which is again great to see. What you see also is that teachers play a key role here in creating inclusive systems to prevent bullying. So the study by Alame was a 10-country study across Europe that highlighted that discriminatory bullying by teachers was a big problem for migrants across Europe. So we need to work on our teachers' attitudes for inclusive systems here at that dimension. So that basically those migrant or Roma children who experience bullying in school by their peers stated that their teacher discriminated against them first, and the peers were following the role model of the teacher. And on the contrary, when you had inclusive systems from the teacher in school, then the bullying was not an issue because the children felt included. So there's an issue here, I suppose, also of communicative skills of teachers, communicative skills of our children, of our families, that bullying can be construed also as a failure in communication. And we need to give other resources for how to resolve conflicts, negotiate, group listening skills. All of these wider social and emotional skills are key here also. So there is, going back to Bandura's work in psychology, imitative aggression needs to be stopped, so that if you're seeing people in power, exerting, ruling by fear and anger, then you're going to copy that model and imitate that in your communicative style. This Greek study, I think, is also quite an important one, because this one highlights how, when you don't have a democratic school culture, when you don't have relational spaces where children feel included, where they feel like they're active agents, then you're going to have higher levels of bullying. So student agency is a key aspect here, and this is a spatial concept because it's challenging hierarchical spatial systems, shifting power in those roles. Just to note as well, the Pathways to School Success Council recommendation at EU level has made a very important contribution now to saying to integrate the issues of early school leaving prevention and school bullying prevention, to see these as two inclusive systems issues, where the same system types of supports can help address one issue as well as the other. So from a policy perspective, it opens the door for more resources so that there are two vital areas that are really intertwined. They are two sides of the same coin. So not even if the same child has the problem of bullying and early school leaving, the system supports at a school level can be common for both issues. So member states across Europe now are required by 2025 and ultimately 2030 to integrate their early school leaving prevention strategies with their school bullying prevention strategies. And just a little bit of a rationale for some of this argument for that. We see this study by Cornell et al. In a US context, who pointed out that you don't have to be the victim of bullying to have the bullying atmosphere in your school affecting your non-attendance. So even if you are not the victim, it still can put you off going into school because you feel the threat of that environment. And that bullying has as big an impact on early school leaving as poverty and academic failure, which were seen as two of the major indicators before. So bullying is the third limb here strategically to address if you want to keep children and young people in the school. So our framework in our European Commission report, Downs in July 2016, argued that we need to address these issues together through an inclusive systems framework, as we say, linking with space. So just to sort of emphasise other aspects of that, there's the direct impacts of bullying on early school leaving. It brings school absence, negative interpersonal relations with peers and conflict, low concentration in school, decrease in academic performance. Almost every indicator that you would worry about for early school leaving prevention, you see it also for bullying prevention. So the interplay between these two is vital. So as we've seen today earlier, this idea of multi-professional teams for complex needs, family support services, the outreach to families, not only in the home but also in community centre spaces. How do we develop our community spaces to engage so-called hard-to-reach families and communities? As well as recognising that some issues such as suspension and expulsion from school is a displacement of a bullying issue perhaps into an early school leaving issue, so we need to stop that. So there are just some other considerations for the future. Thank you.